afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of What the Why with Barbara Ann on RVN Television. If you haven't seen us before, our show features conversations with diverse leaders from all walks of life about why they do what they do and how they figured out these things. Whether you're sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, or if you feel stuck and you want to get unstuck, whether that's in your company, your job, or even in your life, all of our guests have something in common with you. At some point in their lives, many of them felt similarly. Today is no exception. Please join us in welcoming Matthew Cahill, CEO of the Precipio Company. Matthew, who holds the registered mark on the very accurate phrase, "If you have a brain, you have a bias." That phrase is the foundation on which Precipio Company is built. Their process includes identifying hidden and sometimes not so hidden biases that impact company performance. Matthew takes an introspective, self-reflective approach to moving organizations, again, this phrase is also registered, bias to belonging, and coaches organizational leaders to reduce mental stakes, strengthen employee relationships, and increase productivity. His unique proprietary approach meets businesses where they are and accurately identifies, analyzes, and addresses how biases of all types impact their bottom lines. Matthew's demonstrated success with some large clients such as LinkedIn and Salesforce, and dozens of small to mid-sized companies looking to mitigate how a wide range of cognitive, social, and institutional biases are impacting their bottom line. I got to meet Matt almost 2.5 years ago because his company sponsors an amazing Wednesday meeting called Inclusive Leaders in a Virtual World, which I've often referred to as both finding my tribe and my weekly dose of spending time with people who have similar mindsets. So I'm super excited to have him join us today. So please join with me in a virtual round of applause in welcoming Matthew Cahill all the way from California live to our show. So yay. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Yay. So having said all of that, as our show audience knows, one of the things that we always do after kind of running through somebody's bio, because everybody, has a tendency to say, "Oh, wow, no wonder I'm so tired." What did young Matthew want to be when you were growing up?
It's a great question, Barbara. And thank you for having me on the show. Thank you for all of the people that assist in making this happen. I can respond to that by saying when I was younger, I didn't want to grow up. So I spent a good deal of my time. I was the youngest of four children. And I think that there is something to this whole birth order thing. It's not a determining factor in the trajectory of everyone's life, but there's lots of studies that show birth order things. There's a lot of patterns there that present themselves. And so, yeah, I spent a lot of time just not wanting to grow up, just wanting to travel and see the world and it really immerse myself in other cultures. Because one of the handful of life lessons I learned in college is how much I don't know and how much more there is to learn. And I think a modern approach towards business, especially leadership, is thinking like you have to know everything. And that's there's a lot of people around executives who expect them to have all the answers. And the really savvy executives that I work with today, they know better than that. And they'll allow people to think that if the context is right, but they really surround themselves with tremendous people.
Mm. So that was kind of a little bit of a transition from where you were to how you got here today. Um, it's interesting. A lot of people would not necessarily, a lot of people, because of their own biases, would say, okay, who is this white male who's kind of become known in many circles as the person who's focusing on, if you have a brain, you have bias. So How did that become your real passion and your approach in your business?
Well, I think you were alluding to work that was at one point 4 years ago lovingly referred to as DEI work. Um, Bias is often associated with that. But even then, the unique characteristic of bias is that it's more than just one type of social construct. So yeah, you're right. I'm a white, cisgender, middle-aged man. Uh, what am I doing in this type of work with diverse companies and companies that are filled with people who don't look like me? Why am I leading these conversations? I think that's sort of what you were getting at.
Not from my perspective, but I'm sure I know that there are people out there that are like, who is he to be leading this conversation? And my response is, why not? So
Yeah,
what do you mean by that? So why wouldn't you? For example, a lot of people don't realize that only 7 people were part of the original NAACP because they weren't in positions of power to be able to speak out. So whether perceived or reality, who better to participate in the conversation than someone who's actually in a position to help foster the change?
yeah, I think those are the contexts within which I can really shine. I can really I can really make a difference is any type of context that has up to or any type of white male percentage of the people in the group or in the organization or in the executive team or whatever when that voice or uh that presence needs to be there, then I can shine in that context. With any of my engagements that the Precipio company has garnered over the last 10 years, I'm very mindful of having representation on the leadership side of the fence, on the facilitation side of the fence, on the coaching side of the fence. And so I always have that in my mind. It's never just about me. And I may not even be the right person for that company, for that individual. So I'm always very mindful of who I am and what I'm capable of.
And I think that's one of the things that so many of us who know you appreciate about you, because you're always looking to learn. You're always looking at how you can feature and foster and elevate other people. And you also recognize that there is so much to diversity. Like, in a lot of circles, some of the challenges that we face today, because diversity got very, very hyper focused on like race, or gender. And while those are absolutely important conversations, you look at all of it, ability, you know, so forth and so on. So, and you've got all kinds of tools. For those of you you definitely are going to want to check out Recipio Company, his blog. There's so many different resources out there. You absolutely want to follow him on LinkedIn. Um, you've got all kinds of resources that you've built that you just make available in some instances.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
let's
yeah.
talk about those. I mean, because the wealth of information is that you make available is extraordinary.
Well, and I love that you're highlighting a couple very prominent trends in the workplace, right? When Me Too hit the mainstream, gender bias was the number one selling hit. There was a large appetite for understanding what that means and what that means in corporate workplaces. And there was lots of examples of people making very ardent strides towards mitigating gender bias in the workplace. And I think it's useful. One of the copyrighted conceptual models that you were talking about is the bias ecosystem. And as it turns out, bias is a very useful linguistic construct because it can be the basis for behavioral economics. And you can open that up with a room full of CFOs or accountants or, people who speak that kind of language to understand how to make decisions better. Bias can be in the realm of social constructs, so race, gender, culture, age, orientation, abilities, religious, politics, media. Like all of those are in these things called social constructs that we build our world around. But bias over time, the way it gets institutionalized is really the area that ultimately needs to be disrupted. Because if you don't get at the root cause of bias in the world that we work and live in, then the others are just going to continue to get perpetuated.
Now, there are some out there that are going to say, institutionalized bias, what is that? So, if you could give a little bit deeper dive into that, because a lot of people don't realize that the systems that we know and think are normal, in many ways have evolved to not be.
Yeah. I think with this with this illustration, it just clearly shows the cycle of how bias is born out of our brains through our actions and behaviors, gets manifested in these different social constructs, and then over time those behaviors and actions become our processes, our protocols, our systems and governance. So in a typical workplace, let's just take hiring as a process, right? Every company needs to hire people. So there's lots of bias that's been researched. There's lots of bias that's evident, that's openly evident in the hiring processes. And there's been lots of tools that have been developed to mitigate that bias. But if that bias doesn't get mitigated over time, you end up with a very homogenous workforce. So you get many white males at the top of the pyramid making all the decisions. And then you get, various different types of people who make up the rest of the organization. And I think that's an example of an institutionalized bias, right? It starts with like me bias, that decision makers all look the same. They hire for the same types of criteria. And then over time, you end up with the institutionalized bias. And then once it's institutionalized, then it impacts the thinking of the people doing those processes in the next iteration of things.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, because a lot of people really don't understand that. And I believe we are approaching already our halfway break. So, for those of us who, if you're joining us, please come back for more of our conversation with Matthew Cahill at the Precipio Company after a few words from our sponsors. Welcome back to What the Why with Barbara Ant and today's special guest, Matthew Cahill of the Precipio Company. And as you can see on his screen, trademark holder of If You Have a Brain, You Have a Bias. And before the break, we were talking about institutional bias. And it's interesting because, yeah, bias shows up in so many different ways. People don't even realize. And you started touching on a couple of them, like affinity bias. Like to be with people who look like us, sound like us, act like us. And you've been on this journey for some time. Um, and as with everything, it ebbs and flows. Um, what would you say are some of the greatest challenges that you've experienced along the way?
Um, I think the greatest challenges along the way are always are consistently figuring out how to run a small business. It's a services based business. There's lots of opportunities to be generous and helpful and loving and caring and really embody the work that needs to be done. And at the end of the day, you're still trying to run a business. So you need to do all of the other things that are done to run a successful business. And you need to do them with a lot of care and compassion and kindness and empathy and understanding. And so I think, really, once you identify your passion, whatever that might be, it's really about determining how you're going to measure the success of that business. And if it's to get to $1 million, there's lots of entrepreneurial operating systems and different things that you can do to and people that you'll surround yourself with to work towards getting that goal. But I think setting the timelines, right? Like I was describing the bias ecosystem as over time. That's the hardest one for our brains to really understand. Time in and of itself is something that's not natural to our brains. Our brains are very instantaneous, right? We're in the moment, and then our memories are like snapshots. They're not motion pictures. And so we remember things in snapshots, and I think that's a contributing factor to this polarized world that we find ourselves in.
Oh, wow. I mean, yeah, I hadn't even thought about it from that perspective. Um, I just as part of this, so much of this, as you described, was part of your journey, but I imagine there were different influences that you had along the way. Um, some of whom I understand you've even teamed up with to form the group that I get to participate in every Wednesday that I'm free. So, um, but who would you say are some of the bigger influences as part of your journey, and how?
So, one, you know, obvious is my wife and my children now. So I'm in a biracial marriage. It's actually biracial, bicultural. Um, my wife represents as black as I do white, but she identifies as Latina. Her first language is Spanish. She's more comfortable, singing and dancing saya and eating salteñas and living that whole life. We are the proud parents of two kids who are ABCs. They're Afro-Bolivian Caucasians, which is an identity that we just made up. Like we didn't have that, didn't exist until it became a thing for my kids, and they're now teenagers and they're growing into their own people. And so I used that one time in a meeting, and I said my children are ABCs, and this gentleman raised his hand. He said, American born Chinese. I was like, oh no, no. So there's lots of learning and evolving of the language that people are using to identify themselves in the workplace. But my wife is the source of my strength. She is my rock. She is the chairman of the board of the Percipio. So it is a family run business from that perspective. And then with IOVW, that was such a exceeding of expectations. IOVW was initially a desperate attempt to just generate new business because of this thing called COVID, right? A global pandemic. Nobody knew they were getting themselves into. Like it was, a run for the hills and batten down the hatches and lots of reactionary things. And I never envisioned that 5 years later, almost, we would have thousands of people that registered for this over that time. And each week we get 30 to 40 of the most inclusive leaders on the planet to join and just share and be and connect with one another so that we can all lift each other up that much more. And Barbara, you've been a tremendous voice in that community. I mean, you described it as your tribe, and for certain people that's what they find there. And so I don't see that going away anytime soon.
And those of us who do, in fact, I met with somebody this morning that we all shout out to Gloria, aka Glow. Just
No.
just met with her this morning, and we were talking, and a lot of people don't even realize your company provides the support to make all that possible. There's real costs and time investments in all of that, including the volunteer board. And so for people who now participate from around the world, some of whom will get up at the craziest of times just to be able to be available because of their time zones. We're all super grateful that you provide that forum when there's others out there. No offense to the groups that I belong to that charge. but your efforts to make this as inclusive as possible have really made this as inclusive as possible, even for those who maybe otherwise couldn't afford to participate. And so we're super grateful for that. So, as we start, I can't believe we're actually winding down. It always thought it might feel a little bit different in this format, but I'm like, nope, it's just like going right past. As we start to wind down, you know, with our country and the world and the state that we're in and the way change is kinds always ebbs back and forth and back and forth. Um, where do you see yourself as we move forward and the importance of the work that you're doing when so many of us still feel it's so important and others keep saying it isn't?
Um, well, to the naysayers, I would just say it's just a matter of time, and you can try to continue doing things the way that you've done, and if they're working for you, great. Uh, but it's literally impossible to go back in time and be something that you think once was. So, um, I think for our world today, it's important to get outside of your own bubble, in whatever bubble that may be, red or blue or right or left or, you know, regional. Maybe it's regional based. Maybe it's whatever that bubble is. It's important to get out of it. I think the longer that you stay inside of any one bubble, our brains are just wired for comfort. And so you just dig yourself in, and then before you know it, you find yourself in a rut. And if you're in that rut and you don't know it, then that rut becomes like it could become a depression. I mean, it could become just such a cyclical thing that you're just unhappy. And so it's really important to get outside of that bubble and to really get into, intentional safe spaces where you can be vulnerable, you can share, you can disrupt stereotypes that are holding you back about people, places, and things.
So well said, especially the part about, it's interesting. We know that 1/3 of North and South Americans and Westerners are experiencing mental health challenges. The only improvement in those numbers is 1/4 of people in Asia. So that's a lot of people that could really benefit from your advice. Um, and I guess one last piece of wisdom. You're working in this space and you are a small business owner and you were very candid about some of the learnings. Somebody out there who wants to do this work, and there are a lot of people that really believe in this work and want to pick up the torch, so to speak, and keep running with it, especially of the younger um, generations. Uh, what advice would you have for them as they um, move forward into trying to make the changes in the world that you've been working on for so long?
Um, I think the younger generation is already um, thinking in ways that it took you and I 2 decades in work to figure out. And so they're not subjecting themselves to a lot of the same stuff that we did. And kudos to them. I think the reaction from people of uh, established generations, to be very kind with the language that we're using, um, is to say, well, you haven't served your time, or you haven't like built up any experience, or there's like this criticism, and that's a reaction, and they're just entitled. And while there may be some truth to that, I think there's also there's not a need to haze people the same way that you were hazed just because you were subjected to something that you didn't like and you stuck with it for a long time, and they're not doing that. How can that be a bad thing? Like that takes courage and that takes strength. And so I think that it comes back to moving beyond our snapshot judgments, moving beyond what I call the binary. right? Our brain is wired to store things in binary terms, this or that, black or white, yes or no, on or off. And life is so much more than a binary construct. And it starts here, and we need to just build off of that and really figure out how to best structure and support one another going forward.
And that is the perfect note on which to end. So, thank you so much for taking what felt like a really short period of time to share your thoughts with us. And I look forward to having you back in for future conversations in other forums. Um, what is the best way for people to connect with you?
Uh, LinkedIn or the website, percipiocompany.com, the same way that it's spelled on the screen. You can go to that website. There's ways to contact me there. There's way more information than you can possibly consume in one setting. So bookmark it, go back to it. Some of the tools are tools that you can use on a daily basis, the mindful moment, the meditation timer, the diversity cards, the deal me in cards are inclusive behaviors that you can use. And, there's lots of things there that are really, really helpful. And those that are starting out in this type of career, if you want to get into consulting, that it's more people problem solving, the tools that are there, you can learn how to use them. You can reach out to me, and I'm certifying people on how to use the Percipio Company approach towards coaching and consulting.
Awesome. Awesome. I have to have a conversation with you about that offline. Um, okay. Like I said, anybody who's ever done a training with me, I know some of you who are watching have, you've heard me quote him. So now you have met him through our show. Please go to his website and check out his resources. And thanks again for joining with us today and sharing elements of your personal and professional journey with us.
Thank you, Barbara. It's a pleasure being here.
Now, as for some of our upcoming guests, you can tell we have some of the best, and you don't want to miss any of our conversations with them. Again, just as in the past, they include leaders of all ages from all industries and backgrounds. Many of them overcame seemingly insurmountable challenges to figure out their why. Some of them did actually know it from the moment that they could start talking, which was a nice surprise recently. In any case, please tune in to learn and be inspired about how they did what they did and how you can achieve whatever you set your mind to by overcoming the fear of change or failure. If you've missed any of our past guests and want to check out what they had to say, you can catch all 3 seasons of What the Why on RVN Television's website on the What the Why page. You have so many viewing choices these days, so thank you so much for tuning into our show, and please tell a friend or colleague about us. And also, please remember, whether you want to make changes in your company, your career, or your life, no matter how big or small, please join us again for more informative and illuminating conversations with guests such as Matthew, who navigated whatever challenges might have been in his path to find his purpose and live it. And
Perfect.
we are out.
Okay.
Yay.
Yep. So thank you so much, Matthew. We will get you'll get an email from me when everything is set up and ready to be viewed online or, and through the app. Okay.
That sounds wonderful.
Well, thank you for joining us. You have a great rest of your day.
All right. Take
And
care. It's nice to
Bye-bye.
sort of meet you. Great to see you again,
thank you.
Barbara.
You too.